right. Take her alive.
Okay,
Welcome
good.
to Reflect. Yes, yes, I believe we're here. I believe we're here. Welcome to Reflect, Recalibrate. We are your lovely Lady Artivist host, Janet E. Dandridge and Danny Snyder. This is part one of the Environmental Art and Advocacy Collection. We'll be discussing how interdisciplinary environmental art responds to environmental justice issues. And before we get into the convo, there's a few quick things we want to share, or maybe a couple of quick things. First, we want to acknowledge the family and friends of those who have passed away during these Texas floods, these recent Texas floods. We are sending them healing vibes and love and strength. We also want to share a quick news update. We're doing this thing, giving you quick news bites pertaining to what's going on within the arts and the federal government, what is happening. So today's quick news bite is from the Pittsburgh Arts Council, the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. And this news is as of Thursday, July 10th, 2025. There has been a lot to digest since the passage last week of H.R. 1, Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And our thoughts are still evolving. I'm reading directly from the website of Pittsburgh Arts Council.
But I think that represents me too.
Yes, right? Here's what we know so far. The bill includes some provisions that could benefit cultivating donor pipelines, most notably the reinstatement of the Charitable Act, which allows more individuals to deduct charitable gifts regardless of whether they itemize. However, this small win is overshadowed by the tremendous strain the bill places on the nonprofit sector. WESA Arts reporter Bill O'Driscoll addresses some of these concerns in his latest report, New Tax Law Threatens Philanthropy in Pittsburgh. Organizations, particularly those in health and human services, are already operating with limited resources. Under this legislation, the Big Ugly Bill Act, they will be expected to fill widening gaps in healthcare, food security, and social services. Okay, so just to read that again, and I said Big Ugly Act.
Oh,
I said that.
yeah. Yeah, that's more appropriate.
Organizations, yeah, particularly those in health and human services, right? Under this legislation, they will be expected to fill widening gaps in healthcare, food security, and social services. The financial and operational burden is likely to far exceed any increase in charitable giving this bill might encourage. Okay. And this is the quote from, I believe, that report from Mr. O'Driscoll, or Bill O'Driscoll, I should say it like that. Many of the people who work in the arts or are served by the arts will be among those most directly impacted, according to Arts Council CEO Patrick Fisher. To speak plainly, this bill increases harm to LGBTQIA plus individuals, immigrants, single parents, people with disabilities, and communities of color. H.R. 1 does not simply reduce federal support, it deepens existing inequities and leaves our sector and the communities we serve even more vulnerable. Rather than strengthening the vital work of nonprofits in the arts and beyond, this bill makes that work more difficult. So that's the latest update.
Yeah, I think I could say this. I'm not sure if I can, but just for me personally, what I've been mostly focused on is food, as you know, working in working with Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Family Nutrition Program to increase access to healthy foods, because we live in a food desert here in Lynchburg, Virginia, and also to provide educational tools to teach folks, I mainly work with the kids. I don't work with adults, but teaching kids, and others teach adults, and teaching them how to prevent chronic illnesses through physical exercise, through eating healthy. So what I do is funded by SNAP Ed. So that's within SNAP, it's the SNAP Educational, which was completely cut. So
Wait a minute, it was completely cut?
SNAP Ed.
SNAP
There's
educational was
SNAP.
completely cut.
There's SNAP, which helps people get access to healthy foods, or just food, right? But healthy food in particular. But then there's SNAP Ed, SNAP Education, which is like 10% of SNAP, and that's cut completely. That was eliminated. So
Wow.
a lot of people don't know that and don't realize the impact of SNAP Ed towards preventative care as well, right?
Yes.
Teaching people like, here's what you do with a squash. We just gave you a squash, and if you've never done anything with a squash, this is what you can do with it. But also, like, here are some things you can do with your healthy habits to prevent chronic illnesses. And in my mind, this is also an act, an act of protest, taking. Sorry, I'm very distracted. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but my noise is like, it sounds like an earthquake outside my door. Can you hear that? It's
I
two
don't hear it.
kittens. It's two kittens that want to come in. So I apologize if it's noisy in here. Um, they will eat too. I promise they get access to. They they smell my fish that I had for lunch, so they're a little mad at me right now.
Okay,
But
I
yeah,
see.
so it's there's a lot of people who are going to, I'll say probably, because nothing's official yet, but a lot of people in my field who are probably going to lose their jobs.
Wow.
And
Mm,
um it's difficult because they actually, with my job, they're like, hey, you're not allowed to have any public political views on it. And that's where I'm like, well,
mm.
I'm an activist. That's not going to work very well.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that that I'm going to be going back to, doing my own art and activism, and, not working for the man anymore.
Hmm.
But I am very upset about what's happening with SNAP, and I am looking into other ways where I can still help increase access to healthy foods to folks in this area on my own terms. But
Yeah.
as far as the bill goes, because they've cut so much, our food bank already is getting overwhelmed already. And a lot
Oh.
of people don't realize the food bank works a little bit separately and differently than SNAP, right? People who can't get SNAP, people who can't get food, go to the food bank. And so now that we're going to have more people who can't get as much with their SNAP benefits, what are they going to do? They're going to go to the food bank. They're going to go to food pantries, which are, they're filled by the food bank. So already, I went to the food bank last week to pick up a few things for this free produce market I was doing last week at the
Mm.
library at their summer feeding site. And when I stopped by, I just wanted to just pick up a few pineapples because I heard they had some extra pineapples. The line of people there was crazy. I'd never seen so many people in there. And I was like, people
Wow.
are already, and nothing has even gone into effect yet. And I'm already
Wow.
seeing it. I was like, I've never seen that many people in there before. So, but
Wow.
that's the big fear of how nonprofits like that are going to get super overwhelmed. So already I'm seeing that. Like, people are projecting it, and some people are like, oh, you're worried too much. The same way when Trump was elected, people are like, don't worry so much. They're not going to cut Medicaid and all this stuff. It's like, okay.
Thank you for giving us that personal insight so that people know that it is a reality.
Yeah,
People
it's
aren't
already happening.
imagining, right? Things are already happening. It's happening. It's happening. The impact is here. Period, point blank. Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, thank you, Danny, for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about the anger, and I know we were talking earlier about being angry. Going back to the Texas floods,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sharing that me and one of my sisters, we were just praying that they were going to find more people alive. And it was in that group of people that were missing were 24 girls in a camp, summer camp. And I think the youngest is 8, like the youngest age in the camp. And as the week went on, they started finding their bodies. And it just, you know, it just hurts. It's sad, and you pray and you send energy, good energy to the family and the friends. But I was just wondering, like, were they advised in time? The camp leaders, the people, what happened? What was the breakdown in notifying people that this was about to happen, or did it happen just so fast that no one could react quickly enough? Those kinds of questions have come to mind. And when folks say that there's no global warming, the earth is okay, humans aren't doing anything, I think about these instances,
Mm-hmm.
not only of the environmental impact, right? The human toll, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me mad.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me sad. Like, why aren't things in place to
Yeah.
prevent this from happening
Yeah.
as
It's
best as we can, because things naturally happen, but with technology in the 21st century, right? Like,
yeah, I keep thinking about like all these new AI data centers and stuff that we're building. And I'm like, priorities, like what should we be building here? What should we be investing in here? And yeah, no, I'm mad. I'm mad. Like, how can this happen? Yeah, in the 21st century. How can this
and,
still happen? But it's also, I can't remember who said it. I was listening to an NPR bit about it, and someone said, don't underestimate Mother Nature, though. Don't underestimate it. She's a beast. And I was like, okay, that's fair. That's fair. And water scares the hell out of me personally. Like,
mm,
I don't need to live by an ocean. I don't need to live by a lake. I don't need to live by a river. I'm good.
mm, mm.
And, but for my time living in Texas, I will say, with my experience doing environmental activism, I would say as much as maybe 90% of my environmental activism has been in Texas. So in Texas,
Mm.
they're, at least in Austin, which is pretty woke, right? Actually, should I say that word woke anymore? I don't know if I want to say that word anymore. Sorry about that slip. Rewind. Austin, which is pretty hip.
Well, just so everybody knows, this word that has been used
I
for many,
know.
many, many years, right,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
represent being aware, let's just make it
Yeah.
short and simple, has now been taken over as something that's negative. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a metonym for negativity. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, please
Mm-hmm.
continue,
Yeah.
Danny.
I know. And it's there's a lot more activism happening in Austin than what I witnessed in the rest of Texas by comparison. I didn't spend a lot of time in Houston and in other towns in San Antonio, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening in Austin. It is the capital, right? And even one of the examples that I brought for today for talking about environmental activism and just environmental art and advocacy, that was based in Austin, and the conversations around that piece, a lot of it was about floods. A lot of it was about drought and floods, drought and floods. And then, like, what was crazy is right after that production ended, and right after that time, that's when I had moved to Germany, and it was so crazy after living there for like 7 years or whatever and moved to Germany, I had just managed to dodge that crazy ice storm. Do you remember that when that happened in Texas and people lost their power? People were
Yes.
dying in their homes.
Yes.
And there was like, how does this happen? Now, maybe because Texas doesn't like state taxes, maybe that's why everything, including their education system, is kind of weak. Maybe that's why, but it's like, to me, I'm like, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable that it is at that people don't have access to these things like care, electricity, shelter, in that incident. But there are conversations happening. This is not a new thing. These conversations have been happening for, what was it, like 15 years ago, longer than that I was in Texas. My whole time there, people were like, what are we going to do about these droughts? What are we going to do about these floods? What are we going to do about these droughts? Now these crazy ice storms, what are we doing about it? You know what I mean? So these are not just suddenly new things.
That's what's so wild about it, right? This has been going on. It's not something that all of a sudden happened like some new phenomenon that has occurred in the world. So why aren't we prepared in these different places? And why are people's homes and other spaces that people utilize built in places that clearly can be consumed by weather systems that you can't do anything about? And I believe that it's connected to the disregard of human life, because if a developer can go somewhere and say, oh, I can make some money, even if these buildings, will fall down easily if some type of major storm comes up, or developers are just like, hey, I just, can develop this land. Let me just go ahead and develop this land, regardless of what I'm being told about the environmental impact or the human impact, because hey, I need to make this money. I want to make this money. And then people, it seems like, and I don't know all the facts on all of these things. So audience, if you all have any facts, please share them in the chat about developing areas that clearly have some sort of high I don't know, problem
Risk.
of, high risk, thank you, of an environmental catastrophe, right? And oftentimes those living spaces, the people who live in those spaces are not economically well off. Even there are people who are wealthy who live, by the beach.
Right, where there could be a hurricane, but you take that risk because you want the view, and I don't get it.
Exactly.
I'm like, you take your hurricane, I'm good.
Exactly. But a high number of the individuals who live in places, let's say they're built on landfills, right, are folks who don't have that money to live in a place that's not built on a landfill. Let's just go there, right? Why do we do these things? Connecting to social justice. Why do we do this? Why? Why do we allow this to happen? And I say we because if we're not doing the work to change it, we're complicit. Right? If we're not talking about it, if we're not taking actions, we're part of the problem. So this is one of the reasons why we do this work on RFC, to acknowledge, to talk about, to take action, to ask our audience to do that work, right? And we will be here to guide all of us in doing that work. I want to go to that first question, speaking to our audience.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, it's only been 20 minutes into the episode. We should probably start off our question to the audience, our warm-up question.
Yes. So the question is, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think environmental art? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think environmental art? And I'll put it in the chat, okay? So that we all have this in front of us. And please share. So Danny,
You want me to go ahead?
what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is art with an environmental purpose, meaning like it's trying to do something for the environment or trying to raise awareness about the environment. But I think that's because of the kind of work I've done. Because as I was thinking more about it, I was like, well, you know what? Like for example, I mentioned earlier this one piece that I'd worked on back in Austin, and a lot of these other projects that I've worked on, we always were very eco-sensitive as we were making these projects. Like we're not going to go to Michael's and buy a bunch of supplies. We're going to try to figure out how we can use recyclable materials to make our work. If it was something physical, even kinesthetic, or sorry, if it was like something kinesthetic, like theatrical, what kind of spaces we're doing this in, and how do we acknowledge that land that we're in. So I was thinking more about, okay, well, environmental art isn't just about the environment. It can also be made with the environment, made with nature, taking from nature.
Yes.
So those were the two things I was thinking about as I went into this collection.
Yes, I think about the latter of the two that you gave. I think about how you use the environment to create art.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me think about performance art, being
Mm-hmm.
in public spaces. Which environments do you choose to perform in, and what does that signify? For some reason, the first thing that doesn't come to my mind is like social justice, right? Like it's weird because it doesn't. That's not the first thing that comes to my mind. Um, but when I start to think about it more,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So I think about environmental justice, art pertaining to environmental justice, and to make it clear to myself in
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
brain, I think about art pertaining to environmental justice. And so, what does that art look like? But primarily, the first things that I think about are performance art using the
Mm-hmm.
environment. I'm thinking about where people do work, where people create work. Um, yeah, yeah, that's
I mean, that makes sense to me because especially if your background in visual art, you know what I mean? That makes sense to me that that would be your context because as I was researching environmental art, I was like, oh, wow, like I guess I learned a little bit about environmental theater while I was in university. We didn't do a lot of that, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I'd kind of forgotten about that whole thing I'd done like feels like a million years ago. But yeah, it's like it was interesting looking at some of this research. I didn't realize between like the 60s to now how the definition of environmental art has changed so much that it really
Mhm.
was originally, it really was just about how you are making art in the environment. So if you were like in a park and you were making maybe a physical structure out of sticks and twigs in the park, which part of me is like, that's just this is indigenous work there. You know what I mean? It's like it's funny how we're like, oh, this is environmental art. I was like, isn't this what we've well, not I would say we, my people, but like, isn't this what people have been doing for a very long time? So, um, yeah, that's where I find it interesting. Some of these older, quote, older definitions that still don't, they kind of disregard what indigenous people have been doing for centuries, right? But yeah, it was interesting. I did find this one. Actually, I'm gonna ask you, have you ever been to the Tate, Janet? Have you ever been there?
The Tate Modern in London.
Yes.
Yes, I have. Yes, I
Yeah.
have.
When did you go?
What was
How long
that?
ago was it?
Oh, God, I was like 20, maybe 18.
Okay.
2018, I think it was. And I actually did see a work by a female artist, and I can't remember her name. I thought it was she Japanese. It was a work where when you approach the building, there's a mist, like a fog. And so everyone's walking through this fog.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I can't recall if I can look it up while we're here, I'll
That's
share it.
cool.
But yeah,
I went once and it was back in like 2006. So it was a long time ago. But I found this article on the Tate website, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of outdated at this point. It's from like 2010, I believe. But it's called To the Ends of the Earth, Art and Environment. And it's written by a bunch of people, and it was written after this whole conference that they had done about art and the environment. And apparently, a big thing that came up in that was what is the definition of environmental art? Because it keeps changing. And there were a couple of quotes from that I'm going to read here real quick. One of the quotes they said, and we'll make sure to put this link down in the show notes below. At one point, they said, in art discourse, environment seemed a vastly expansive term, informed by a comparable frontier spirit, capable of embracing a multiplicity of interventions, both gallery-based and in wide open spaces. Then I'm going to move a little bit further into the article. In the 1980s, they were more often seen as deeply felt expressions of human relationships with nature, with the term environment coming to refer almost exclusively to nature or the natural environment. And they as kind of a little bit context before this, they talk a little bit about how, like in the late 60s and in the 70s, that's when the term was becoming a little bit more narrow. And then moving further on to the article, this is like the last part of the article, last paragraph. There is an ambivalence here about how environmental art should be understood as a category of recent landscape art, predominantly American, with a concern for nature, or an all-embracing approach to art's relationship with the environment that makes the latter term sound a lot closer to ecological. Indeed, there has been an increasing tendency to subsume environmental art under the banner of ecology, particularly apparent in a number of exhibitions. In this way, the land of art of the late 1960s and 70s has come to be seen as a proto-ecological art form. So this is a very long article. I only wanted to pick like 3 quotes from it to just kind of give a little bit of a overview of what I was learning, because I was like, I didn't realize we had so many different like discussions about and debates about what environmental art is.
yeah, the language of art is always a debate, right?
Yeah, I had to. Just the debate of the language of art. How much
Yeah,
we need
right.
to focus on the language of art, right? Right. So much of our job, like being critics and just being artists, is just the language, right? It's like not doing the art that comes to you naturally, intuitively. It's just how do I write about the shit that I do?
The clarity, right?
Yeah.
Well, landing on ecological,
Hmm.
huh? And then that being the definition of environmental art.
More in like the 60s and 70s is what they were saying. Yeah. And now we're
And
moving into a whole other environmental art being lumped in with advocacy, right?
okay, so speaking to what you just shared, and I definitely, as Danny said, we're going to share this link so y'all can check that article. In the chat, we have some responses as to what is, right? What is environmental art? What comes to mind first? Murals. They beautify urban centers and also reflect deeper thought through the artist's imagery. Next thought, art that interacts with nature or environment. The next thought, literally working with stones, leaves, etc. in an outdoor setting is the first thing that comes to my mind. like The Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I bet I know who wrote that comment.
Yeah, you know who wrote that
Because that
last one.
person,
Yes.
that person's constantly sending me pictures or videos of his work. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And a part of me is kind of like, oh my God, you spend hours out here doing this, and then it just washes away. But then I was thinking, like, that's very similar to what we were talking about in our braiding and textiles collection, is just, meditating with the work.
The process.
Yeah, yeah, braiding the trees, and you're not gonna get paid to do it, but that's not what it's about, obviously. That's
Well,
about, the space, the community you're building as you're braiding.
all of the examples, and this is totally inherent in environmental art, and how we are defining it is utilizing the environment to create work. Is that sort of the short way we can phrase it right now? Using the environment to create work, all of it is ephemeral, right? To a
Well,
certain extent. Like you said, like things, it's degradation that happens, right? That's the correct word, I believe.
well, are
Even
you
with
are you thinking natural environment or any like man-made environment? I was thinking
even with
all.
the, I'm thinking all of them because the person mentioned murals.
Exactly, right.
So it can be either a natural occurrence where the mural, starts to degrade, or there could be whitewashing, right? When you interact with nature, let's say you're working with soil, that soil is going to turn over, right? Things, it will shift, right? It's going to change. It's going to move. It might be taken and put somewhere else. A developer might come in and build a building, right? And with the spiral jetty, that definitely speaks to erosion, right? So it all is ephemeral in a way. And so how do you make an impact with something that might not be around? So you make the immediate impact. How long does that last, and how will that immediate impact resonate throughout the experiences or the world? Maybe I'll just say it like that. The people who experience it, how does that resonate? And I'm thinking about it in that way because of what you referred to in the article as well, about environmental art relating to social justice, related to advocacy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when you're doing advocacy, it's a continuous thing that must be done, right? Even once you have some wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using unionizing language, when you have some wins, you have to continue to do the work, because when you're working with the environment, and man, this is, I'm just thinking about, like, spiritually, you're
Mm.
continuously feeding your spirit and others. So when you are showing them how to use the environment to create work, you can use your body, right? Your body is a part of the environment. So when you're in different spaces, how does this make you feel? What does this make you want to do? What is the follow-up after you
Mm-hmm,
experience
mm-hmm,
that?
mm-hmm. Going back to what you said before, I think that, we've talked a few times about how all art is political. I don't want to say that's like I want to speak for you, but that's something I've said a couple times where I'm like, I feel like all art is political. So maybe that's why environmental art to me is just naturally politically. It's got to be about climate justice. But I've also been, I'm of the generation where at a pretty young age, we started talking about, hey, the planet's getting too hot. Like Al Gore's documentary came out when I was in middle school. So generations before me weren't necessarily having those conversations.
Not with the same intensity
Right. And I
and or
want
acknowledgement.
exactly. There's that too, because I'm sure there are many communities that have been dealing or I just can't imagine. I know there are many communities that have been dealing with climate change and have seen it before it might have been called climate change, right? And yeah, so trying to remember where I was going to go with that. But I think that where was I going to go with that? My brain got lost.
What?
Shannon,
You were talking about
I will
all
say,
artists.
yeah, oh, thank you. All art is political. All our environmental art is, naturally political. Jan and I did say before we got out of this podcast, we're like, whoa, okay, are we ready today? Today is like, we both are, a little out of it today. Part of it is because I just came back from vacation and Janet's actually trying to take a vacation right now, but
It's not, I don't even know if I should call it vacation.
yeah.
It's an annual visit to be with family and
Yeah,
friends. Like,
right.
so
It's a lot of to-dos, right?
yes, yes.
But I will say my vacation actually was in Alaska, and I was
Yeah,
learning
talk
a
about that.
lot about indigenous people in Alaska, and I was learning a lot about glaciers and climate change. I mean, every tour guide was like, hey, I'm not saying this to bum you out, but you should know this is not what that glacier looked like even just a few years ago. And these are things like, to think about when you're going back home, how you can make an impact. I had several tour guides say that of like, think about what you can do, you know, don't get so bogged down by, someone actually, I read a quote the other day and I really liked the phrasing that they used of um how people can get really what's a good word that I'm looking for like getting bogged down by all of the issues of like all the environmental.
Overwhelmed,
Well, there's like another word I'm looking for, the dread, like
bombarded.
the but it is like a lot of dread. It's a lot of like, oh, like heaviness of like, how do I even start?
Doom.
Doom. Thank you. This doom of like, where do I even begin? Like, what do I do? I looked up a list earlier about what are like a good list of all the environmental justice issues, and I was like, okay, I was overwhelmed to say least, like as you said. So these tour guides in Alaska, they would encourage us to think, for example, like let's say you go back home and you're like, you know what, I'm going to be better about not using so much plastic and I'm going to try to recycle more plastic. Let's say that becomes your thing that you're going to do. Well, what's one way you can level it up? I had one tour guide said that, like, think about just one way you can level it up to make it more of a community action. Like, can maybe if your community, if your neighborhood doesn't recycle, is there something you can do to help encourage your neighbors to recycle and like maybe you take that trash somewhere or maybe thinking about how you can repurpose recycling or a challenge of like who can make the least amount of trash this week, right? So I appreciated that they were like thinking of, encouraging people to think of ways that they can level up their actions to make it a community action. And that's just one small piece, but if everyone did their small piece, then we would see some change. Maybe it's not enough change, but we would still see some change, right? And so trying to be optimistic about it. And yeah, so you know what? As far as what did I learn in Alaska, like looking at glaciers, one thing I was thinking about as I was looking at these glaciers was actually Amy Funderburk, who was in our study group from the Design Advocacy Collection, and she writes for Art and Object. She wrote an article with them about it's actually called These Extreme Artworks Embody the Climate Crisis. So she looks at a couple of different artworks that are embodying the climate crisis. And I was really into these pieces by David Buckland that she was showing, where this guy was putting these projections on these glaciers of text and then taking photos of it. And the images are really cool. And the text that he would use, the different pieces of text was very interesting. Like one piece that's very common that I've seen in a couple of different articles, the text says burning ice. And
Let me interject real quick. Hold your
yeah.
thought, because what you're saying in the audience, a comment is time is a very important aspect to consider in environmental art. And so you're talking about, these glaciers, right? So I'm just going to put in the chat right now, to create environmental art, what must you consider as an artist, as an activist? Please continue giving us examples of what was said.
Yeah. Some of the other things that he would project on was discontinuing the future. Just ice receding. The great white sail.
The great white sail. Discontinuing the future is.
Yeah.
And
these are right on the edge of these chunks of ice that are about to come off these glaciers, right? And so one thing, that was super impactful for me on this tour through Alaska was this one particular glacier that we went to, where they did a 10-year time lapse, which I thought was so amazing, that they invested 10 years into this time lapse, where they showed you how far back the glacier is receding over time. Just 10 years. It was insane how much feet was lost. It might have been even up to a mile. Please don't quote me on that. I can get those specific details. Actually, I will find that time lapse and put that in the show notes below. Because I know it is somewhere on the internet when they showed it.
Hold Danny to her word. Hold Danny to her word.
But it was, oh my gosh, watching this. It's weird because the ice is being pushed down the valley, or the glacier is, being pushed down into the water. But at the same time as this ice is coming down, it's all, the ice is always coming down and falling into the water. It's also receding back. It's further and further back, where the ice is actually falling and going into the water. Yeah. And this is happening. This is happening all over. And so if you look at pictures of what these glaciers looked like before and what they look like now, and we're talking about within you and me, our lifespan, we're not talking about over centuries, right? It's just wow. And so it does create a sense of urgency of like, we're already too late. This has been happening for,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's so.
That doesn't when folks say, I'll say newscasters or journalists, even scientists, when they say it's too late, it's like, hey, y'all, well, then you think people are going to do anything if they're like, oh, it's too late? You know what I'm saying? Like, give us a little bit of hope. Is there some kind of hope? If there's not hope, okay, I understand. You're saying it's too late. Okay. But damn, what can we do right now? And like you said, the example of, hey, do something in your community. If people aren't recycling, or if they're not upcycling, hey, get folks to upcycle, do as much as you can, because recycling takes an impact on the environment too. And even when I think about the artworks where, for example, like you said, by Buckland, and the projections on the ice, which is just like, wow, that's really awesome. I'm thinking about, so what's the impact of, the flight to that area, right? To get there. What's the impact of the gasoline used in the boat to get there? Like, because all of it makes an impact, right? So thinking about environmental art, well, how can we truly, as artists, not do more damage? And that baffles me. I want to create work that is environmentally sound. Yet I know that I have to get to the locations to, let's say I'm even getting found objects in different cities. I have to get there. So that means I have to use transport of some sort. Or I'm going to, ride a bike, right? I can ride a bike, or I could walk. And then time, like, oh, how am I going to do this? I need to be with my 3-year-old. I need to take care of him. Is he going to go with me? All these things to consider when thinking about the environmental impact from artworks. That makes me think about the film that I brought up earlier before we got on, that film Flow. And I'll read from my browser what the animated film was about. The animated film Flow tells the story of a Black cat navigating a flooded world after a cataclysmic flood. The film, which features no dialogue, follows the cat's journey as it encounters other animals and learns to survive and cooperate amidst the chaos, right? So here I am watching this film with my family, my partner and our 3-year-old, and it's stunning. It's beautifully done. The content obviously is painful, and you have to acknowledge, okay, so what can I do, right? All these floods are happening, but hey, what can I do as a human when nature is like, hey, you know what? We're just gonna pour all this down. But don't we have an impact on nature as far as like what we put into the atmosphere? Anywho, with that movie, it shows the relationship between these animals and how they begin to work together. And I think that's important to show that, right? We can still do work to create a better environment, a better living space for us, a better way to steward the earth if we do this collectively, if we all agree, right? Like language, we all agree on this language and we all do it together. Yet that film, that took digital production, which most likely they had to use servers, right? People working in different places, right? People might have to fly from different countries, to work together. But regardless, it's some type of environmental impact. And we know the environmental impact of, for example, these large servers that house data or that help us receive and send data. So even watching this film and thinking about it right now in terms of environmental art and social justice, I'm like, oh my gosh, does this mean we can't have these types of artworks?
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want to create boundaries, but like, nope, you're no longer in this category because you did too much damage in the process.
You already did it. You already did it.
Yeah. Man.
Oh,
That's a tricky one. And that's where, that's where some activists will get on your ass about it, where they'll be like, oh, thanks for making this. By the way, this is how much CO2 you used in the process. Bye. Like there's those people on the internet, they're gonna let you know, like, and that's what's interesting too, is like for example, I had this one encounter with these 3 wise men up in Skagway and in Skagway, Alaska, and it was interesting. They said they wanted to share a story about the land, and they couldn't share a lot of the story because it was sacred. And here are these people like with these phones and stuff trying to record and things like that, and they're even saying this is why we don't do that, because we're trying to keep this sacred, and people are still using their phones. And I'm like, put your phones away. They're clearly telling you to put your phones away. I want to know as much as I can, even though I know even when they do put their phones away, they're still not going to tell the whole story. And it was funny how they kept kind of checking in with each other. Like, I'm not going to say, I'm going to skip that next part, or I'm going to not say this, or, and it was kind of funny, like them trying to navigate, like, what can we say? What can we not? Kind of felt like with me and my job of like, oh, I'm not allowed to be political. And I'm like, I don't think you guys know who you hired, but that's okay. So it was, it was like, there's so much happening in these different tribes and these different lands. We don't know, there's activism happening that we're not privy to. And it's been interesting, this one book that I've been reading that's a memoir of an activist in Alaska, and I'll also share that in the show notes. And it's there's so much activism that's been happening, like you said, and even before climate change was a term.
A buzzword.
Right.
A buzz phrase.
Yeah. And Yeah. I guess I can end with just that, but it's, yeah.
Yeah. Look, maybe one of the words to learn and get agreement on is respect. Because
Yeah.
when you were talking about, hey, we're sharing this sacred space and we're saying, I don't know if they said it directly. I don't think I heard you say they said it directly, but hey, put your phones away. We understand you want to record this because it's
Because they're like,
amazing.
oh, I see my first Indian. I'm like, oh my God, no,
Oh
stop.
wow. Oh wow. Oh wow.
Stop.
Wow. 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 That's
So
another show.
bad. Yeah, so bad.
Yes. So y- let's talk about the word respect. What does that mean? We don't have to get into that now. I had a conversation with my class, one of my classes, I don't know, 2 semesters ago, about respect. What does that mean? And how can we agree on what respect means so that we actually respect each other? you know,
Yeah.
So we have to respect the earth. What does that mean? We have to respect all the environments that we use. I mean, look, I'm thinking about a vehicle because I need a new vehicle, right? I live in the woods and I want a hybrid. I would love an electric vehicle, but budget wise, it's not really what I am looking at right now. So a hybrid actually can work. But even hybrids, one of the hybrids that I was looking at is starts off at like
Mm-hmm.
$65,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh,
Like,
but that big, ugly, beautiful, ugly bill, whatever the fuck it is, excuse my language. But you get like there's a benefit, I guess, if you have a new tax or car loan, I guess that's a thing in
uh,
there. You can't
what
pay for
the
groceries, but I guess you get a benefit
oh,
if you buy a new
I thought
car.
I see this is stuff y'all we haven't looked into this to fact check, at least myself. I'm thinking of what I'm about to say, so please fact check. I thought it was something in there that removed incentives for people or individuals who purchase electric vehicles. I thought there
Oh,
was
yeah,
like
no,
some
that
incentives removed, right?
no, but if you just buy a car though.
If
But
you
you're
just buy a
right.
car, right?
You're right about that. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I don't know why I forgot about that, but that, yeah.
Oh,
Oh my God.
man. So how do we respect the earth as artists, right? Even as as activists across the board. I know environmental activists who are actually environmental activists. They are doing
Mm,
all the things, right?
mhm,
Yet how do we respect the earth? How do we give love to the earth, steward
mhm,
the earth in a loving way so that this place is here in the
mhm.
chat, my partner. um baby daddy is like, I just saw my baby walk by and we need to make sure glaciers are still here during his lifetime. And it's
Yeah.
real. It's like he's 3
Yeah.
now. What's it going to be like when he's 10?
Yeah.
What's it going to be like when he's 12?
Yeah.
um I mean, that's the question I think we need to ask ourselves as artists. How can we create work and truly consider the impact on the environment, the adverse impact on the environment, so that we can create work that has the integrity we want it to have,
Mhm,
and it also does not hurt the
mhm,
environment?
mhm, mhm.
How
Yeah.
can we do that?
And
How
that was,
That's the question.
yeah, and that was actually when I lost my train of thought earlier. That's kind of where I was going with, like,
Mm,
I'm sensing from my experience in Alaska and even just from the few people I know in this area too, and back in Texas. But there's a lot more actions I think that are happening that aren't on social media, that aren't, we're not seeing, and that are a part of even maybe sacred practices and rituals. And these are means that are more sustainable and better for the planet, right? So I think there's things happening we don't see as much because they're not on social media, and I'm like, kudos, because if I could just not use social media, that'd be amazing.
Wow, that would be one way of just I mean,
That'd be a form of activism. Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah.
YouTube, Zoom.
Yeah.
it's
My friend though,
it's
she asked,
overwhelming.
yeah, Natasha, she and I were talking one day. Natasha was in that one episode we did with Studio 23 where she was helping me down to Richmond for that interview. And we were talking one day of like when I was like, man, I just want to, because both of us just want to just get off social media completely. She's like, but I just don't know how I would be finding out about things. And I'm like, yeah. I think part of my
Hmm.
problem is I don't actually use social media very much. I kind of post what I need to post and then I just
Hmm.
let it do its
Hmm.
thing. I don't scroll, but I need to be better
Hmm.
because there are cool things on there that I want to see. But I was like, I'll just go back to zines. But even then, I'm like, the zines, I'm just taking down trees with that. Just chopping down the Amazon with that. It's like, shit, I gotta just make things from leaves somehow. Like,
But I had this couple of seasons of fall leaves falling and wondering what can I do with this, thinking about it. And there are artists who have used leaves to paint up on
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
create work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, is a start.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it's because we are so, like, I guess the word is beholden, or
Mm-hmm.
we have to use all this technology. It's like we have to use it.
Yeah.
Uh, It,
I often
it's
feel like
like
I
we have,
have to. Yeah.
but then I question it. Well, do we have to? But I'm like, hey, I don't see my family in person for the majority of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a little boy who needs to know who his family is. And so using video calls is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I know that using these digital devices is not good for our bodies and the earth. So how do I get around it? How do I make sure he knows his family well when we live in a whole different place
Mm-hmm.
and he sees them, you can see their faces, hear their voices, right? It's so difficult to take oneself out of the life that we've been given through consumerism. Really,
Mm-hmm.
like to pull ourselves out of consumerist thinking, it's really difficult to do, right? It's really challenging to do. And I'm, as an artist, looking at the work and printing photographs and wanting to figure out
Yeah.
how to get a photograph printed without printing in,
Yeah.
like, using the ink.
Mm-hmm. So Janet needs a mute because baby needs a little bit of love for a second. I'm not gonna lie, my kittens are meowing like and crying and whining like crazy outside the door. I'm really glad my microphone's not picking up any of it. It is so distracting. My two babies are like, "Are you done yet?" This is my version of labor. So I want to mention real quick this project that I'd mentioned at the very, very top of the episode, just real quick, because just in case people are like, wait, what project are you referring to? When I mentioned this project I'd done in Austin before the show started, Jan and I were talking about just a couple different examples of environmental art. And I'd mentioned this one project that I worked on in Austin. And when I say I worked on it, I wasn't actually part of this production. I was more part of the documentation of the production. And then eventually PBS did a little spotlight on them, which was great. And they used a lot of my footage. Super thrilled about that. But I basically did all this video documentation photography for them and was like at all their rehearsals and at all their shows. And they took their show to a bunch of different places. They had talkbacks sometimes after their shows with kids and with different audiences. It wasn't just for kids, but what was super cool, first of all, the show's called Six Seasons. Or sorry, Once There Were Six Seasons, and it's by Glass Half Full Theater. And Caroline Reck at the time was the artistic director. I believe now she's got two co-artistic directors. Because this was actually kind of a long time ago now at this point. When I was working with her, it was back in like, I want to say like 2015, 16 is when I was really helping them. It might have been as early as 2013 and 14. But basically, this show, it's a puppetry show. And from what I recall, there was like not even any narration, there was like little maybe sound effects for even like the little characters they had. These little tiny puppets had like they had little like sounds to show that they were communicating, but they were just cute little sounds. And then there was music and there was sounds of nature, atmospheric sounds, but they were all these small miniature puppets. So they would build cities. They would build glaciers. In fact, their opening scene was this big glacier with these two polar bear puppets, little puppets, and then they get separated on floating ice. And it's sad. And for a kid, it's like, oh, what does that mean? Like, what does this mean? And so then afterwards, I could have talks with the kids of like, what does that mean? What is happening? And so they were showing all these climate crises. How do you say that plural?
Crises,
Crises?
crises,
Should
because
probably
it's, I
know
think
that.
it's CRISES, plural.
Yeah. But they were showing different effects of climate change all over the world, not specific to Texas, but they did have a scene that was specific to Texas, which was very cool to kind of bring it on home, right? But each scene was in a different part of the world, starting with the glaciers. And it was cool. One, it's visual, and I love puppetry because you have to watch, you have to pay attention, and every time something happens, you have to interpret it like what is this polar bear doing? What's it trying to do? And then there's like an element of joy when you discover, oh, this is what's happening, even if it's good or bad. Like you're like, oh, I'm understanding the story, right? And I'm maybe relating to the story. But yeah, it's very cool production, and there's some great videos on their website. I know they're great because I took them, and we'll share that link there below. But I think this is an awesome example of environmental art, not just because of what it's advocating for people to like wake up and like, what can you do about one of these scenarios and situations? What are you going to do? Which one resonated with you the most? Now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. What are you going to do? Right. But also, all the puppets are actually made from recycled stuff, which is awesome. And we're talking about stuff from nature, like sticks and twigs and things. And we're also talking about styrofoam. Like their glacier was made out of styrofoam, which I thought was really cool.
Styrofoam is just one of those things that does not degrade.
Yeah. Yo, styrofoam is not cool, but the way they use styrofoam,
Oh
I thought
yeah,
was
they
cool.
upcycle. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
Recycling. I did a work, I don't know, it's 2010 probably in LA. And we made a song in the rhythm of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Mm.
And it went plastic, plastic, plastic. And it was about the environment and how we as people need to adjust our practices. And one of the facilities we visited was a recycling plant. And I was like, all of this machinery is not helping. Those black clouds, like the smoke coming from it is not helping. So recycling from that point really was a thing for me, as far as, yes, it's important to recycle, but how do we make this mechanism more environmentally friendly? So upcycling, like what you're talking about,
Right.
using the styrofoam to
Right.
create work, right, makes so much
Mhm.
sense to me.
Mhm.
And you made me think about that work, because I've always been, trying to do my part, and doing that work that was through an organization in LA called Great Leap. And I worked with Dan Kwan, and there were 4 other artists, and we were in a cohort, and that's what we were focused on. I feel like it was always a focus of Great Leap. It's always environmental impact. And that particular work, I cannot recall the name of it right now, but we had to do all this research. And a lot of the work that we did was with our bodies. And we had Young A Park, who taught us, really, it was somatic work, really. And so connecting to nature, connecting to our bodies, understanding how we impact the environment through our bodies, in addition to visiting those facilities. And then we came up with this work where we upcycled materials. We performed in different places. One of which I remember was atop a hill in LA, overlooking the city. And so people came into this space and were able to experience, I think it was outdoors, that particular performance. And that makes me feel good in terms of, okay, I have addressed this before in work. And I have an understanding. I now have to update that understanding of how I can do this, especially now as a mother who is taking care of her toddler and has to do a totally different schedule, as far as the needs of another human. So thank you for bringing it up, because that work with the upcycling, because it made me think about that. I also want to acknowledge what's been being said in our chat right now.
Excellent.
So things that we have actually addressed, how race plays a part in environmental art, and how we interact with the environment, and how the environment interacts with us. Regarding time, an artist named Andy Goldsworthy purposefully uses time as an element in his work. Another audience member said, "We can't truly own the earth. We are her stewards." And that's followed up by the audience responding, "It's a very interesting conundrum because we are bent on technological advancement, yet technology is being utilized to pull us from a natural way of life. So how do you progress while stewarding the planet?" And audience members agree with that. And then I think one role of the artist is to hopefully point people back in the direction of reconnecting with nature, since modern life, in quotations, modern life has inspired such separation from it. We can only do our best. And then the same audience member says, "Let in the orange tabbies."
Okay. That's Amy. I knew it was Amy. I knew she was on. Hold on.
And the reason why we don't share names is because we don't know if you all want us to share your name. So that's why I'm referring to you as audience members. So when folks are able to check in on YouTube, or they're watching on YouTube, or they're listening,
so
then you could see the chat and see folks' names.
Y'all see my sweatpants too? That I'm wearing sweatpants today. What's funny is now they're not there. They've been meowing like crazy.
Yeah, they're like, forget it, Daddy, forget it.
It's funny, like you can't do right. You can't do the podcast without your baby daddy, and I can't without my tiger daddy. Like, because he needs to. Usually, he's here in the other room, his office, and he's got the cats, and he pays attention to them. And now they're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, it's easier to do it when the tag team is available. Like, but for today, for example, and it's happened a couple of times. My baby boy is doing so well, though. He is entertaining himself, but yes, he comes over here and there.
He loves you. Loves you.
Yes. But I think this last point about the direction that the audience members are making, directing and reconnecting with nature. We as artists point people back to the direction of reconnecting with nature in all of our works. How can we do that? Withholding or upholding the integrity of our work, even if it's not about the environment. How can we do that? Is that possible to redirect folks back to nature? Especially since we're all here in these digital spaces.
Even you and I, we've never like hugged.
It's like we're in different parts of the world. Well, of the United States, right? But you can say different parts of the world, right? But it's how do you do that? It's going back to what I said about connecting with family for my child, right? Boy. Yeah, environmental art.
Can I let me also, if I can, because I was thinking of that word glut. I was like, that's probably a better word that I was looking for earlier, glut.
Okay.
Since we've got Miss Amy Funderburk on, I'll also, I think this was from her article. Oh, maybe I think this was from her article. Let me double check where this quote is coming from. But I had written here a quote. Here comes, so here's one, Tabby. Hello. Hi. Okay. So here's the quote. Well, I think this is Gizmo. Gizmo's on screen. The artists recently participate in the exhibit Fault Lines, Art in the Environment at the North Carolina Museum of Art. In an exhibit, are you purring into the microphone? In an exhibition statement, Eliason shared his belief that a major responsibility of artists is to help people not only understand something mentally, but also to feel it emotionally and physically. By doing this, art can mitigate the numbing effect created by the glut of information we are faced with today and motivate people to turn thinking into doing. So just something to end with there. And yes, that was from Amy's article, from Art and Object. These extreme artworks embody the climate crisis. Ooh, don't fall. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, Janet, you want to make that the call to action for today?
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Let's
'Cause
turn thinking into
yeah.
doing.
So by doing this, art can, I already lost my space. By doing this, art can mitigate the numbing effect created by the glut of information we are faced with today and motivate people to turn thinking into doing. So when you've seen a piece that made you think a lot, like these glaciers with this text on them, and what can I do now? And a
Yep.
small action, and then how to, like I was saying earlier, how to scale it up just one notch and make it a community action. So that'll be our challenge till our
Yeah.
next episode, which we actually
Yeah.
got some time
Yeah.
between now and our next episode.
Yeah. 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 It's just what can you do and do it? That's the call to action. What can you do and do it, right? I'm going to be thinking more on this. I think about this all the time, but we can always think more and then act more. Yeah. Danny, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a good way to round this out for today because we're totally over time.
We are, but this is not only overwhelming, but
Yeah.
you know, as always, we pick topics that there's a lot where we can talk about, or at least in this one, there's a lot I could talk about. Back to like textiles and braiding, I was like, oh, I don't know what to talk about in this subject, but with
And we
this
learn
one,
about, we
yeah,
talk and learn about, discuss.
right.
Yes.
There's a
Yes.
lot I can say on this. In fact, if anyone here who is following me, I'm about to do my very first mural project ever. So with a bunch of teens, and I'm super excited about that. That's going to be next week in the next 2 weeks. So very excited about that. But yeah, this is a subject where lots I want to say and lots I want to ask. In fact, our next episode, we're going to be interviewing Sadi Norman, who is someone who I've gotten to know briefly through the Artist Relief Project. That's also where I met Miss Amy Funderburk. So in part 2 of the Environmental Art and Advocacy Collection, we're going to be chatting with Sadi. She's an interdisciplinary artist working specifically, I mean, her website, this is what she says specifically, Environmental Art and Advocacy, and that is the name of our collection. So mark your calendars and tune into our YouTube. That's going to be on August 2nd at 1 p.m. So we got, a couple weeks before that. So you got plenty of time to work on your call to action. And we'd like to remind you all that our podcast is completely funded by the two of us, your lovely lady artivist hosts, and your donations. So help us keep our podcast going if you can, please, by making a donation through our PayPal link in the show notes below. Janet, any final woosah?
I am just finishing out thanking our audience in the chat.
Yeah, thanks
and
people for
reiterating
being
what you said.
thanks
Yeah.
people for being so interactive in the chat. That makes this so much more interesting when it's a dialogue. I know so I
Yeah.
like to talk a lot about this, but I also like to engage and listen and
Yes.
converse.
Yes. And also like interacting with each other. So that's always good. People are like, yeah, that's right. What you said. So oh man.
Validation.
I am excited about the next episode, and
Mhm.
I'll just leave it at that because it is a lot to consider, and I am excited about what action I'll be taking. And again, like Danny said, it could be something so small, like, hey, purchase some dishware instead of using all paper plates and plastics throughout your
That's
house.
the worst. That's the
Okay,
worst.
yeah, y'all know who I'm talking to. You're on here. All right.
Oh no, you called someone out?
All right. So thank you again. We will see you next time on August 2nd. Right, Danny?
August 2nd, 1 o'clock, ET.
Peace.
Peace. You are being so bad.